It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon on Westside Boulevard, until the calm shattered. At 3:17 p.m., a frantic call came into 911. "Help. I've been robbed." A man in a blue hoodie, he had a gun. The caller was trembling. Within minutes, officers swarmed the area. They found a man matching the description, 22-year-old Marcus Hill, sitting alone at a bus stop just 2 blocks away. Marcus was handcuffed on sight. To the officers, it seemed like an open and shut case. Wrong place, wrong time. But what no one knew was that the small device blinking on an officer's chest, a body-worn camera, was about to change everything. The footage started simple. Marcus standing up, confused, asking what he did wrong. The officers frisked him. No gun, no stolen items. One officer radioed, "Suspect detained, matching description." Another added, "No weapon recovered." Marcus's voice, shaking but steady. "I didn't rob nobody. I just got off work. You can call my boss." It should have ended there. But pressure was mounting. A victim was waiting. A crime had happened. They drove Marcus to a makeshift witness ID spot, a controversial practice called a show-up. The victim nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's him." It was enough to charge Marcus with armed robbery, a crime that could put him away for 20 years. At the arraignment, Marcus pleaded not guilty. His public defender, Laura Chin, knew something wasn't adding up. There were no fingerprints. No gun. No stolen goods. Laura requested the full bodycam footage. When she got the files, what she saw chilled her. The bodycam had caught a detail the human eye had missed. In the background of the arrest, about 50 yards down the street, another figure had darted into an alley, wearing the same blue hoodie. Frame by frame you could see it. While officers focused on Marcus, the real perpetrator had slipped away unnoticed. Laura moved fast. She filed a motion to dismiss. Meanwhile, investigators reopened the scene. In that alley behind a dumpster they found the missing gun, and a bag containing the stolen wallet and watch. Further footage from nearby surveillance cameras revealed everything. The true robber, a known felon named Andre Dawson, had committed the crime and fled just before Marcus even left work. Marcus Hill had been innocent all along. After 47 days in jail, Marcus walked free. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Marcus, holding back tears, simply said, "If it wasn't for that body cam, I'd be in prison right now." The case sparked outrage and reform. The police department overhauled their use of body cam footage. Show-up identifications were banned. Body cams had been introduced to protect the truth. In Marcus Hill's case, they did. Freedom didn't taste the way Marcus imagined. The first night out he couldn't sleep. The walls of his small apartment, once a comfort, now felt like another cage. Every creak in the floorboards, every car passing by, sent his heart racing. Marcus wasn't just free. He was broken. The media buzzed around his case. Reporters praised the body cam footage. Politicians called for reform. But none of that could erase what happened. The lost days. The broken trust. At his favorite diner, the cashier, someone who had once known him by name, looked at him differently. Strangers whispered. Some crossed the street. Freedom was complicated. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the police department scrambled. Internal Affairs launched an investigation into the officers involved in Marcus's arrest. Questions filled the air. Why hadn't they reviewed the body cam footage sooner? Why had they relied on a shaky witness ID? At a tense press conference, the police chief admitted mistakes had been made. Promises followed, retraining, oversight, new policies. But for Marcus, promises didn't pay the bills. He had lost his job. Missed rent payments. Lost friends. The hunt for Andre Dawson intensified. Detectives pieced together the timeline using surveillance footage, witness accounts, and body cam frames. Andre had vanished, slipping into the shadows of the city. A break came 2 weeks later. A pawnshop owner recognized the stolen watch. Andre had tried to sell it. Fingerprints matched. An arrest warrant was issued. Now it wasn't just robbery. It was evading police, tampering with evidence, and obstruction. The man who had ruined Marcus's life was now a fugitive. One night, Marcus sat by his window staring at the city lights. His lawyer Laura Chin called. "They found him," she said. "Andre Dawson. They've got him cornered downtown. It's only a matter of time." Marcus exhaled slowly. For the first time in weeks, the weight on his chest lifted, just a little. But a new question lingered, heavy and cold. Would justice finally come full circle, or would the system fail him again? Downtown buzzed with activity that night, but all Marcus could think about was Andre Dawson. The man responsible for stealing his freedom was finally within reach. At 8:42 p.m., police closed in on an abandoned warehouse near the industrial district. The tip from the pawnshop had led them there. Bodycam footage, once again, captured every 10th second. Officers moved swiftly through the darkened building, flashlights sweeping across rusted machinery and crumbling walls. Then, a noise. A scuffle. An officer shouted, "Hands where I can see them." Andre Dawson emerged from the shadows, arms raised slowly, defiant to the end. Inside his pockets? Another stolen wallet. A knife. No gun, he had ditched it long ago. But it didn't matter. The charges stacked high enough to bury him. News of the arrest hit the airwaves within the hour. Marcus sat silently in his apartment, staring at the TV screen. There was no satisfaction. No victory dance. Just numbness. The reporters spoke about justice. About accountability. But Marcus knew better now. Justice wasn't a news headline. It was personal. And it didn't heal overnight. The next morning, Laura Chin visited Marcus. She laid out his options clearly. We can sue the department. False arrest. Emotional distress. Loss of income. You have a strong case. Marcus stared at the papers. The lawsuit could take years. It could drag his pain into public courtrooms. Or he could walk away and try to rebuild in peace. Both choices felt heavy. What would you do? He asked Laura. She didn't answer immediately. Finally she said, I'd do whatever helped me sleep at night. Later that day, Marcus visited the bus stop, the same spot where he had been arrested. He sat quietly watching the world pass by. Life had moved on. But for Marcus, time was split forever, into before and after. A kid on a skateboard zoomed past him, laughing. An old woman pushed a cart of groceries. A man in a suit checked his watch and jogged for a cab. The world didn't notice Marcus Hill. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward healing. But as Marcus stood up to leave, a black car pulled up nearby. Inside was a familiar face. Detective Ramirez, the lead investigator. He stepped out, walked over, and said quietly, We're reopening the entire Westside Boulevard investigation. A lot of people owe you more than an apology, Marcus. Marcus stared at him. The system that had nearly destroyed him was trying to make amends. But the question was, would Marcus let it? Detective Ramirez's words hung in the air. We're reopening the entire Westside Boulevard investigation. Marcus didn't answer right away. He just watched the detective, watched the weight he carried. Maybe Ramirez meant well. Maybe he truly wanted to fix the broken pieces. But Marcus had learned the hard way. Good intentions didn't erase bad outcomes. Days later, Marcus found himself sitting across from a room full of lawyers, community leaders, and journalists. They wanted him to tell his story. To become a face for reform. You can help make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else, one advocate said. Marcus looked around the room. Their eyes were full of expectation and desperation. He thought about the nights he had cried alone, the jobs he had lost, the friends who had disappeared when things got hard. Now these people wanted his pain to fuel their cause. But what about him? What about the life he still had to piece back together? Laura Chin, his lawyer, pulled him aside after the meeting. You don't owe anyone your trauma, she said gently. Your healing comes first. Always. Marcus nodded. But deep down, a seed of doubt remained. If he stayed silent, was he letting it happen again? To someone else? To someone without a body cam to save them? Meanwhile, Andre Dawson's trial moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Body cam footage. Witness testimonies. Stolen goods recovered. Andre showed no remorse. He smirked through most of the proceedings, like he still controlled the narrative. But he didn't. Not anymore. He was sentenced to 15 years without parole. The courtroom buzzed with closure, reporters clicking photos, lawyers shaking hands. But Marcus didn't stay for the celebration. He slipped out quietly before the verdict was even read. Some victories didn't feel like victories at all. That night, Marcus sat by the river watching the city lights dance on the water. He thought about the life he had almost lost, the dreams he had shelved, the trust he had buried. He could fight, join the movement, speak out, become a symbol. Or he could heal quietly, build a life away from flashing cameras and broken promises. The choice was his now. For the first time in a long time, Marcus Hill held the pen. His story wasn't finished yet. But how would he write the next chapter? Marcus spent days in silence, weighing the decision. He walked through the city streets, the same streets where he had been tackled, handcuffed, humiliated. Every corner held a memory. Every siren in the distance twisted his stomach. Could he really stand in front of cameras and trust the same system that had failed him? Could he survive dragging his pain out into the open again? The call came late one evening. Laura Chen's voice was calm but urgent. Marcus, the city council is voting on new police accountability measures next week. They're asking if you'll speak. She paused, then added, it could change everything. Marcus stared at his reflection in the window. He looked older now, harder. But there was something else too, a quiet strength he hadn't noticed before. He didn't answer Laura immediately. Instead, he asked himself the question that mattered most. Was he ready to turn his wounds into weapons? The night of the vote, the council chamber was packed. Camera crews lined the back wall. Community leaders filled the benches. Outside, protesters waved signs demanding justice, change, dignity. Marcus sat alone near the front, heart pounding so loud he could barely hear. When they called his name, he stood slowly, his legs heavy, his throat dry. But when he spoke, his voice was clear, measured, unbreakable. I'm not here because I want revenge, he began. I'm here because I survived something that could have killed me. It killed my trust. It killed my peace. It almost killed my future. And I'm not the only one. A hush fell over the room. You have a chance tonight to start making it right. Not with words. With action. He paused, locking eyes with the council members one by one. Don't let another man lose years of his life just because you couldn't be brave enough to change. When Marcus finished, the room erupted in applause. Not polite applause. Raw, aching applause. The kind that comes from people who have bled the same way you bled. Laura met him at the steps, tears in her eyes. You did it, she whispered. Marcus shook his head. No, he said quietly. We just started. That night, the council passed sweeping reforms. Bodycam footage would be mandatory, not optional. Footage tampering would carry felony charges. Officers accused of misconduct would face independent investigations, not internal reviews. Marcus didn't change the world that night, but he changed the city. And maybe, just maybe, he changed himself too. But as the celebration continued outside, a black SUV sat parked across the street. Inside, a pair of cold eyes watched Marcus through tinted windows. Not everyone wanted change. And not everyone was willing to let Marcus Hill walk away clean. The days after the council vote felt like a new beginning. For Marcus, for the city, for the people who had fought too long just to be seen. The media wanted interviews. Organizations wanted him to be the face of their causes. Doors that once slammed shut were now wide open. But Marcus didn't rush into the spotlight. He moved carefully, quietly, choosing his steps the same way he chose his words, with purpose. One morning he returned to Westside Boulevard. The corner store was still there. The cracked sidewalk. The faded mural. But something was different. The fear was gone. People nodded at him in recognition, not pity. Kids rode their bikes past him, laughing freely. Life moved forward. Marcus realized something important that day. Justice wasn't just about punishing the wrong. It was about healing the places where the pain had lived. And he was finally ready to heal. At a small community center downtown, Marcus launched a program. One focused on educating young people about their rights, their voices, and their power. He didn't want another Marcus Hill to lose years of their life. Not if he could help it. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just trying to be whole. And as for the black SUV that had once watched him from across the street, it never showed up again. Maybe it had just been his imagination. Maybe it had been a warning. But Marcus had learned one final, powerful truth. When the system tries to erase you, surviving is its own kind of victory. Thank you for watching. If Marcus's story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, please consider subscribing for more true crime stories that reveal not just the darkness in the world, but the strength it takes to overcome it. Hit the subscribe button. Stay strong. Stay aware. Stay with us. Until next time.